What's going on, YouTube? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Texas Street Stories, where we talk about what happens on these Texas streets. And if you haven't already subscribed, help your boy out and hit the subscribe button. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Robert Delgado, also known as Bad Bob, original Texas Syndicate member, gone Christian. Controversy often creates curiosity, which can be a good thing. My book against the Catholic Church was so controversial that you can only buy in the UK. My book against Islam was so controversial, more so when a Muslim imam converted to Christianity. Behind my book, that like the author of Satanic Verses, I received death threats. My book against gangs offended gang members that they broke my ribs. Opposition does not quench my fire, but fuels it. When I'm opposed for speaking the truth, I double down. I write more and preach more. I'm not writing to be popular. This is not a popularity contest or Burger King where you get to have it your way, sermons or articles. I write about everything: politics, prison, crime, etc. Today, I'm sending you one called Crime titled, "You Want to Do Something About Crime? It Starts in Prison." I consider this one of my rare writings because it's short, rare because most of my articles are long. If you find one too long, you can split it up into a series or put it in part one, part two, or whatever. I'm totally naive to YouTube. It wasn't around when I was out. So let me know how long my article should be, and you can correct if any misspelled words. That New York prison life article you read became a collector's item. The editor said it sold off newsstands in just 2 weeks. Also, so he's asking me, right now I'm gonna read this piece by Bad Bob. It's titled, "You Want to Do Something About It? Crime? It Starts in Prison." Prisons are the epicenter of crime because they become schools for crime and safe sanctuaries for incognito prisoners who have committed heinous crimes in society. Virtually every prisoner will one day leave prison. On any given week, thousands of prisoners that have been locked up for decades in broken prisons get released back into society. But what is society getting back in return for its investment in prisons? Crime was on the decline when Democratic Governor Ann Richards in the late 1980s went on a building prison craze. Politicians from the lock 'em up and throw away the key crowd to fill the nearly 100 new prisons built had to be creative. Misdemeanor crimes became felonies, good time laws were abolished, state mental wards were closed, and their parents given a new identity as prison inmates. Innocent people were convicted of crimes they didn't commit. To date, nearly 4,500 prisoners have been exonerated. The aggravated laws was induced to ensure that prisoners serve lengthier sentences in prison, and a host of other harsher laws were passed to keep the prisons full. This had nothing to do with solving any real or imagined crime problem, but it had everything to do with profits. The state went in the early 1980s from having 17 prisons with an inmate population of 2,300 prisoners to having by the early of 1990s over 100 prisons and an inmate population of over 150,000 prisoners. Prisons that once housed murderers, rapists, and robbers now housed petty crooks, made up psych patients, drug users, and nobody else that the state could get their hands on. The word convict made way for the new word of inmate. The character of many of the new prisoners, as well as the character of the new guards, was totally different from the old past guards and prisoners. Prisons are not the solution, but part of today's crime problem. Prisons have always been like Batman's Gotham City, full with corrupt employees from the very top to the very bottom. Not all Texas guards are law-abiding citizens. The Austin American Statesman newspaper reported that over 1,400 guards, most that are longtime employees, get arrested every year for such crimes as murder, theft, and drug possession. Not all guards are practicing Christians, when the great majority of guards today are Muslims from African countries, which explains why so many black inmates have turned to Islam. Not all of the prison guards and male prison males, when 40% of the guards are women, which explains why every year there are thousands of inappropriate relationships occurring between prison employees and prisoners. Prison officials are cooking the numbers on their books by underreporting the actual number of inappropriate relationships, PREA violations, escapes, murders, violent fights, drug overdose, etc. The truth is being suppressed by government leaders because the horror stories behind bars are not being reported by the mainstream media. The public has turned to YouTube channels like Texas Street Stories to hear about them. Prison officials oppose everything that exposes them. They oppose prison journalists using YouTube. They oppose installing security cameras that can record the stories on tape. And they oppose documenting on paper the stories. The public is being kept in the dark, but not documenting it and recording on surveillance footage. The horror stories it gives the public. The false impression that our government leaders are running a constitutional prison system. To understand the present, we must look to the past. Good time laws gave prisoners an incentive for behaving, in hope of being released from prison earlier. When the incentive to behave was taken away from them, chaos came home to roast. The administration in the past had an illegal building tender system that had used prisoners as guards. The state of Texas for nearly a century had sponsored and armored prisoners to serve as their enforcers. The building tenders were the muscle, the eyes, and the ears of a racist prison administration. The building tenders ran everything by brutal force. The building tenders' arch enemy was the Texas Syndicate, and the Texas Syndicate had an administration ideology. It was in 1976 that Chicanos organized themselves into the Texas Syndicate. The bloody clashes ended when, in the early 1980s, the building tender system was dismantled by the federal court. The dismantling of the building tender system opened Pandora's box, releasing all the evils that plagued the prison system. Violence is the universal language that everyone understands. The fear of the building tenders was real. The building tenders were experts in brutality and torture. Bullies and idiots acted like saints in the presence of the building tenders. And nobody was talking about forming a gang. Fear kept drug smugglers away, escapes rarely occurred, and murders and rapes kept low. Unlike the prison guards of today that are too paralyzed with fear to act in violent situations, the building tenders didn't stand around like spectators at a bad accident. Within seconds, would the building tenders respond? It only takes seconds for someone to be killed, and the building tenders' quick response saved lives. The building tenders' actions defied what guards were always meant to be, but most guards today are only guards in name. This might sound odd coming from a former gang leader that was once violently opposed the building tenders, but living in both worlds, the pre and post building tenders world, my thinking has evolved. Fear must be reintroduced into the prison system in the form of creating a building tenders type of system where prisoners are used as guards. The monster that kept the bullies and the idiots in checks should be recruited to put the gangs and the thongos back into Pandora's box to solve many of the problems plaguing the prison system. To the naysayers that rightfully quote what's in the law books concerning the prohibition of prisoners serving as masters over the prisoners, I say this: the only reason the building tender system is illegal is because lawmakers a century ago made it illegal. But what if the lawmakers decriminalized the law and made it legal for prisoners to serve in the capacity of guards for security purposes? The prison system already uses prisoners in many different kinds of functions. It uses prisoners outside the prison fence as truck drivers, on public streets, and uses prisoners as dog boys with bloodhounds to go after escapees. So why not take it another step further and use prisoners inside the prisoner's fence as guards to do what the guards in the gray uniforms aren't doing? Just like the drug cartels and the prison profiteers that oppose drugs being legalized, half of the prison population is made up of drug offenders because legalization would put them out of business. So, do gang members, bullies, and idiots oppose the idea of legalizing prisoners as guards, knowing that putting them back in control their illicit businesses, recruitment of fresh meat for gangs, and bullying days would be over? After the building tender system was dismantled, there was a statewide lockdown to contain gang warfare. A new breed of inmates were left in the prison general population. Convict principles, convict principles were set aside, and a de facto inmate guard system took hold. I'm talking about the brown-nosing snitches that hang around the bars with the guards, or who are always slithering out of the major's office. Snitches get their power by snitching. These inmates are the new eyes and ears of the administration. They run errands for the guards, pack up the personal property of other prisoners, etc. In return for their slave services, the administration turns a blind eye toward their illegal activities. Incredibly, this class of inmates that are the root cause of everything illegally happening in prisons and responsible for every kind of violence associated with the drug trade, extortion, and prostitution have immunity from disciplinary write-ups. They get caught stoned, possessing drugs, fighting, and so on, and their disciplinary write-ups disappear from the major's desk. By not documenting the infractions, it will make these brown nosers good candidates for parole. Society, for its investment, is getting back radicalized Muslims, gang members, and some people with serious mental health and drug issues. Tired of being a victim of crime and of hearing about repeat offenders fresh out of a broken Texas prison recommitting a senseless crime against a child, an elderly, or simply an innocent person? Do you want to do something against crime? Do you want to do something to put fear in the heart of those that do not fear returning to prison because they have no monster to face? If your answer is yes, it starts with persuading politicians to pass a bill legalizing the use of prisoners as guards. A guard system that will put the de facto guard system back in Pandora's box. A system that will not cost taxpayers a penny and guard salaries to maintain. A system that will solve the nationwide guard shortage problem. A system that will never be shorthanded on guard manpower, and that can ensure the public the safety of both prisoners and prison employees. Because there is so much incompetence at every level of TDCJ, the only problem I see that could arise from using prisoners as guards is that if they are put under the supervision of some TDCJ idiots, the guard system would crash. For example, the Pelage unit was one of the system's best and safest prisons because the warden and staff were competent. But when the staff was replaced by the incompetent Beetle unit staff, the Pelage unit became just as chaotic and corrupt as the Beetle unit. So what idiots at the top made the stupid decision to replace a competent staff with an incompetent one? With a guard system composed of prisoners, the violent and unrepentant will finally reap what they have sowed. They will finally fear returning back to prison, or if they are already in prison, they will behave like saints or suffer the consequences. I'm not saying that the new guard system be implemented at every unit, but that a dozen units be assigned for this purpose. The only thing monsters fear is a bigger monster, and it's this bigger monster that will greet them at the back gate and not their homeboys. This is one of Bad Bob's recent letters. He sent this to me a few days ago. I just haven't had time. Y'all drop down in the comments what y'all feel about that story. Here in a little bit, I will be dropping another video. I will be reading a few chapters of his book, The Unmaking of a Criminal Mind. This is a channel called Texas Street Stories. So anybody that's from any organization, Texas, is well respected on this channel. This channel is for everybody from Texas, good or bad. Thank you for tuning in.